This week, Dave Meltzer reported the death of someone who wasn't dead. He also reported that he'd seen a leaked memo from Warner Bros. Discovery that valued AEW programming as highly as WWE SmackDown. They don't. His leaked memo was an estimate or a guess, depending on who you speak to. These are two examples, with a lot more to come. However, Dave Meltzer is still considered by many to be the gold standard of wrestling journalists. He and Wade Keller were the OGs, the generational talents who took the internet in their hands and absolutely took the wrestling world by storm. But in the modern age, even veteran wrestler JBL has stated, Meltzer was such a great asset for WWE. He was so wrong and so easily manipulated. We need to dive into Dave Meltzer's place in wrestling journalism and journalism at large. How many of those old school practices still work today? What poor standards does he set that others follow? How responsible is he for the explosion of scoopster insiders who create accounts, bolster their numbers as much as possible, and when they're proven to be liars, just make another one? What mistakes has he made, and also what value does he still have? While we go into that, comment below if you follow Dave Meltzer and why. I want to start with some history. As a historian, Meltzer is believed by many in the field to be beyond reproach, and this is something I wholeheartedly agree with. Nobody in the world knows more about wrestling than Dave Meltzer, and this is pretty much fact. His regular awards of big match ratings for matches in Japan confuses a lot of people, but rarely confuses those who actually watch those matches in Japan. While it is a guideline and it is an opinion, you do occasionally get a lot of discourse on the match ratings. It's an opinion, and I don't really have much of an issue with that personally. However, there's more than one way to say historian. Another popular one, old. Dave Meltzer is regularly accused of being old school at best, and this does show in a lot of his work. While Meltzer was at the forefront of wrestling stories and at times wrestling history during his heyday, that heyday featured little to no competition. Wade Keller of PWTorch, a former employer of mine to be completely transparent, was and is his only real competition on that front. There are, however, some key differences between the two, and it's mostly about how they evolved. When Meltzer and Keller first hit the airwaves, they were a new generation of modern wrestling journalists. The defining trait was their individual newsletters. Newsletters at the time were a fancy new thing, just like the internet, and they were the hot-blooded new talent first taking advantage of how global they could become because of it. Wade Keller would wait outside wrestling shows, handing out leaflets to build his initial audience. That's the sort of thing we're talking about here, and that eventually grew into a strong foundation. For a while, this worked. Both men were able to cultivate a fan base that supported their endeavours both emotionally and financially, and still do to this day. The backbone of PWTorch and the Wrestling Observer newsletter were founded in those early moments, and they're still there to celebrate that success now. The key difference though was that Wade Keller was more aware of technology, and this showed in how he evolved versus how Dave Meltzer evolved. Wade Keller built his own site, PWTorch. He moved into podcasting. Recently, he's moving into YouTube. I would argue, based on this site, he's still slightly behind, but he's certainly way more ahead of the game than Dave Meltzer is. Wade Keller is observedly more tech-savvy, and it's both worked and not worked for him. It's the key reason why his website has been able to survive without getting into clickbait or good old-fashioned gutter journalism. It's also the key reason Dave Meltzer emerged as the one and the only, at least for a period. Dave Meltzer is demonstrably not tech-savvy. His newsletter is a Pro Wrestling Observer, highlighting a man who's standing to the side of wrestling, someone who watches but does not get directly involved. Oh, how things change. That is not the name of the website that it is hosted on, because the website itself was not originally designed for the Wrestling Observer. Meltzer came to podcasting and subsequently live shows late. There are arguments about how kicking and screaming it was, but this was led largely by others in the company rather than Meltzer himself. Meltzer is famously cluttered, unorganised, and a bit haphazard. If you've seen the images of his office, you'll understand that. Meltzer has a team of people around him who do a lot of the grunt work, the dirty work for him, whereas Wade Keller historically does do most of the work himself. What this has essentially resulted in is that there's something of a shield around Meltzer. People signed up for his newsletter for rumours because he was the only guy in the game sharing rumours. Speculation was commonplace because, well, who's fact-checking Dave Meltzer? Everyone, right now everyone is fact-checking Dave Meltzer, and for good reason. Meltzer's move into real-time information sharing has been an unmitigated catastrophe. Twitter might just be the worst thing that's ever happened to him, because sharing the same newsletter-based information in real time does not work. At the same time, the sources that he would get information from so long ago are either gone or going. So while he constantly tells people to improve their reading comprehension, he himself seems to struggle to interpret what's actually being said in a fast-moving, modern world that he has not adapted to. If you're a regular on Dave Meltzer's Twitter, I can only say that I found him very short and quite often very difficult to actually work or engage with. Found being past tense, more on that later. There is some context worth adding here, and this is based on how other media treats Dave Meltzer. His world is full of enablers. An example here, Meltzer said in his newsletter recently that he thinks Roman Reigns will face Solo Sikoa at WrestleMania. This might be something he's heard, it might be something he's seen, or he might watch spoiler warning shows on this channel where he's heard it. That doesn't matter, but he shares that information, and suddenly there are hundreds of articles written by outlets across the world reporting that this will be the main event of WrestleMania. The media takes everything he says and blows it massively out of proportion. All of this drives traffic and reputation, ensuring that Dave Meltzer gets paid. He hasn't sensationalized anything. He hasn't clickbaited anything, but he definitely benefits from others who are doing so. As such, speculating for 4 years on the imminent return of The Rock before shortly afterwards someone on that website denying it's going to happen is incredibly lucrative for the entire website. The opinion of Dave Meltzer is clickbaitable in itself, and that's really not his fault, but he definitely can take advantage of it. Also, as per reading comprehension and clickbaitable opinions, when I shared that exact information in defense of him, he blocked me on Twitter. Learn to read, Dave. All of this combines to give us a soapboxer on a par with a presidential candidate. He can say whatever he wants, and wrestling media lap it up because they themselves are trying to make money, and the opinion of Dave Meltzer makes them rich too. The money keeps rolling in. The problem is, that is exactly what's happening. He's soapboxing, they're taking it, and they and he are getting rich off the back of it. What then if what he's saying isn't true? Well, to quote the full quote from JBL, on March 21st, 2018 on Twitter, JBL said, "Meltzer was such a great asset for WWE. He was so wrong and so easily manipulated that he was perfect to feed bogus info to in order to swerve the fans. He should have been on the payroll. How anyone still follows him is amazing." Even the wrestlers themselves celebrate that they were giving this guy wrong information and they were using it for storylines. The Wrestling Observer, who was not in any way involved, was brought into the story whether he wanted to be or not. There is more than just JBL's word to support this. In an interview with Sam Roberts, Wade Keller once told a story of Vince McMahon calling him up directly to get a story leaked. When Keller refused, the story would later turn up in the Wrestling Observer. There are suggestions that Dave Meltzer, the self-described Wrestling Observer, has been used to tell the story that the owner of the company wanted to be told. More bluntly, in fact, in some cases, he became part of the story himself. Ask CM Punk about Dave Meltzer and see what he says. Certainly there are suggestions of a vendetta there. For more on that, check out previous WTF Wrestling episodes on CM Punk and Mercedes Money's treatment from wrestling media in general. Dave's name comes up. Wrestling journalism, thankfully, has moved on now, and I'm thankful to be a part of that. Instant fact-checking makes journalists more careful and more vigilant, and the volatile world we live in means that negative stories are often treated with much more care. Rightly so. Unfortunately, the Dave Meltzers of the world continue to go unchecked by media. When he reported incorrectly on the quote-unquote rah-rah speech from Seth Rollins many moons ago, it took Seth Rollins himself to call him out repeatedly until Dave Meltzer retracted the story. That's why I'm making this video. Dave Meltzer reported that a man had died when he had not yet done so. This blatant, rampant, at times guesswork is feeding a whole generation of so-called insider scoopsters who create Twitter accounts, sign up for more exposure, post guesses for weeks until they're caught, get a load of people into their Discord, then rename their account and start all over again. I am not sat here saying that Dave Meltzer is lying. I just think, unfortunately, accusations of being gullible and easy to manipulate are so easily proven. If the pinnacle of your industry is Dave Meltzer, every single one of us needs to do better. For me, the gold standard now is people like Brandon Thurston, David Bixenspan, Tristan Ashley. They're the people I go to when I want to know what's actually happening. They're the ones providing the right coverage for a modern audience. There's plenty more I haven't named. Shout out the best ones in the comments. I take pride in the work that we do on this channel. We report news accurately and with instant fact checking, hence the beauty of a live format. We don't beat the drum, we just care about people being informed. I cannot, in good conscience, celebrate the sharing of free, impartial news without also calling out those who fail to do so. Now, for Dave Meltzer, I would share the following suggestions. Firstly, screen your sources better, making sure that information is accurate and coming from trustworthy locations. If this quote-unquote leaked memo isn't giving you enough information that you're not doing things right, there are plenty of people who do this so well that you can take a lead from. Learn from your peers. Explain better when you're speculating. Make it clear when you're reporting something so that other members of wrestling media can be called out when they report your speculation as fact. You make it difficult for yourself. Correct news media that misinterpret your intentions to their own end. You are being strung up and exposed when something you say is proven inaccurate by the hundreds of people who desperately re-report anything you say. Finally, slow the hell down. You don't need to be first. That is not the world we live in anymore. You don't have to be the first one to report something to the point that you would report something that will eventually be true. You're not writing a newsletter all the time. Slow the hell down. And check out Spoiler Warning, live Mondays and Fridays for more news. For more on the Wyatt Six story playing out in front of our eyes, WTF Wrestling is on screen right now, ready for you to click and enjoy.